Hi, I'm Sarah Kenrick and I'm working with Canolfynnu in Corwen on their Family Food and Fun project, funded by Comic Relief. Hi, so today we are going to be making some vegetarian pizzas. So ingredients for today, we have some nice vegetables. So we've got one aubergine, one large courgette, green pepper, red pepper, and a red onion. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to chop these up all nice and chunky, and we're going to put them into a dish, drizzle them with some olive oil, a bit of salt and pepper, and we're going to put them in the oven at 180 degrees for about 20 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to get on with that. So with the toppings for a pizza, you can pretty much put anything you like on a pizza, but today, because we want to keep it simple, and we're going to go for those that don't eat meat, so it's still full of flavour, still very attractive to look at and easy to prepare, because that's what we're all about. Okay, so nice chunky pieces of vegetables. And again, like before, just get rid of the white pith, because it's a little bit on the bitter side. Not so much when they're cooked down. The peppers become a little bit sweeter anyway, so it's not too bad. Okay, so we'll just pop all those in there. Okay, so we'll get rid of the seeds. So when we're using the peppers as well, we don't necessarily need to have green and red. We can have a yellow one if you've got one to hand. So not a problem. And with all vegetables, sometimes they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. So if you find that you've ever got small peppers and it says use one, if you've got two small ones, that's the equivalence. Okay, we don't want to do them too small, otherwise when they get roasted they shrivel up and they end up sort of, well, not burning, but they don't look as appealing once they're on the pizza. Okay, so with the courgettes, all of the vegetables I've washed beforehand. And again, obviously with the coronavirus at the moment, it's always good to make sure everything is washed before you start preparing. Okay, so again, just nice and chunky, and this is going to be the nice flavoursome topping for our vegetarian pizza. Again, the same with the aubergine. And you'll find there's quite a bit of water that comes with aubergine, so there'll be a little bit of liquid once they've been roasted, so we'll drain that off when it comes out of the oven. If you're making something like a moussaka or a vegetarian lasagna, for example, you could slice your aubergines up and sprinkle them with a little bit of salt and leave them for a couple of hours, and that will extract the moisture from the aubergine so that it doesn't make your dish too wet. Just a little bit of advice. And this lovely onion. So again, leaving the tail on because these onions are quite strong. Now we peel off the outer layer. They're making my eyes water as we speak. There we go. So again, we're not going to dice them too finely. We're just going to get rid of the end bits and just nice and chunky, maybe in half like that, so that they retain a little bit of their shape once they've come out the oven. Again, 1, 2, 3. Okay, and then get rid of that. Okay, so a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper. Good drizzle, about 4 tablespoons roughly, but just enough. We're going to give them a little bit of a shake halfway through the 20 minutes just to make sure that they're cooking nicely. Give it a little bit of a shake, and in the oven they go. So the next little bit I'm going to do the nice tomato sauce. So in a pan, and we'll get this on. We are going to take 2 cloves of garlic. Now I've tended to use garlic puree in the past, but for this I always think that proper chunky garlic gives a little bit more flavour. So with a paring knife, I'm just going to take off the skin. Okay. There's lots of little tips to get the skins off garlic, but I'm just going to do the way I use. And then just slice, not too thinly because we don't want them to burn, but just we also don't want huge chunks of garlic, otherwise you end up biting into your pizza and having nothing but the garlic. So we just there we go, generously. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to put those into our pan with a little touch of oil. Okay. And I'm going to let those fry off. along with some basil. So with this basil, we're not going to be frying the basil leaves as such. So what we're going to do is we're going to tear the leaves off gently, and then we're going to use those with the topping at the end before it goes into the oven. Okay, so you can see that garlic frying off. So we're just going to rip the leaves off, and we're going to use the stalks. We're going to chop the stalks up finely, and we're going to add them to the garlic, and then that's going to give a nice basil garlic base to our tomato puree. Okay. Now the thing with basil as well, tearing basil is always the way to do it. Let's take that off the heat for a second. It doesn't too hot. If you chop basil with a knife, it leaves a black mark and it doesn't look as attractive. So when you're preparing basil, always tear the leaves rather than use a knife. Okay, so you can see our garlic is browning off nicely there, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the stalks that would usually go in the bin, but because they're still full of basil flavour, I am going to fry them off with the garlic. Okay, on the heat. And then once they've had 2 or 3 minutes, just browning off slowly, we're going to add our tinned tomatoes. Now I've got a tin of finely chopped tomatoes. You can use plum tomatoes and then just chop them up before they go into the pan. Sometimes you can get a tin that's already got some basil and garlic and onion flavour in there, and that is very similar to what we've got here. Okay. So that is, so we're going to let that simmer down for about 20 minutes. Okay. On a very low heat. And then let the garlic and the basil infuse into the tomatoes. Okay. And then I'm going to put my basil there. Right, so while I'm waiting for my vegetables to cook in the oven and I'm waiting for my sauce to cook on the hob, I'm going to do the dough. Okay, some nice homemade dough. So for this, I am going to require some strong white flour, some lukewarm water, some yeast, sugar and some salt. Okay. So into the flour, I'm going to put a half a teaspoon of salt, just to give the dough a little bit of flavour. Just going to mix that in just so that it goes through the flour, and I'm going to make a little well in the middle. Okay, and into my lukewarm water I am going to add 1 sachet, which is 7 grams. You get these sachets from most supermarkets now, and they come in 7-gram sachets, so that goes in. And it's really important that we're using warm water, because what the warm water does is activate the yeast. So in order for the yeast to produce some CO2, it needs warm water, and it also needs some sugar to grow. Okay, so we're going to put a teaspoon of sugar in with our lukewarm water, and we're going to just leave that for a minute or so, just to start activating. Back to our sauce, and you can see that that has started to reduce down already. Okay, and that will be the smell, the aroma, the garlic, and the basil. And I'm just going to put a little bit of ground black pepper and a little bit of salt in there as well. Salt just brings out the flavour of the tomato. Yeah, my grandmother always used to have a little bit of salt with her tomatoes on the salad, and it always made a big difference. There we go. Okay, so the 325 grams of lukewarm water, sachet of yeast and the sugar, that goes into the 500 grams of the strong white flour with half a teaspoon of salt. So we're going to pour it in slowly, and we're going to just combine the liquid into the flour, just stirring slowly. And what we want is to combine them both and make it into a dough ball. Okay. Now, if you've got children, like you do have, sometimes it's quite nice to, you can do this on a kitchen table if you like, as long as it's obviously sanitised and clean. Kitchen table, worktop is probably preferable, and you can pile the flour onto the worktop, make a little well on the top, and pour the liquid in little by little, and the children can mix that in with their hands as long as they're clean. But I always prefer to use the bowl because it's less mess. Okay. You can also put this into a mixer with a dough hook. Again, you can put them all in, all the water in, and walk away. If you've got a nice Kenwood mixer, the luxury of that. But I always think putting a little bit of love into what you make is always good. Okay, so you can see our dough is coming together, and what I'm going to do as a final part, get the light back on. Just make sure, I think that's enough. Okay, so just as a final part, I'm just going to make sure my hands are not going to get stuck to the dough too much. I'm going to bring that together into a nice ball. And then we're going to put a little bit of flour onto the top and turn it out. And then we're going to knead this for about 10 minutes. So just like when we make bread, you're kneading the gluten that's in the flour, and it stretches it. So what this does is makes you have a nice crust to your pizza, so it's not too doughy. And we're also, again, wanting to make sure that we have a lovely crusty pizza. Again, the kids can do this. Give them a small piece each to knead, because it's hard work, you know. Again, just keep your fingers well floured so they don't stick to the dough. So we just pull it backwards and then back, push, pull, push, pull, push, pull. Okay, and then once you've done that for 5-10 minutes, you should get a nice neat ball like that. And it needs to go into a oiled bowl. So what I've done is I've just put a little bit of oil in there. I'm going to put the dough in the bowl, and I'm going to cover it in cling film. And put that in somewhere warm for about 45 minutes to an hour, so that the dough rises. So one I did earlier, okay, whoop, so it goes down, and as you can see, it's gone from that to that, and that's all of the gases coming up, the yeast producing the gases to make the dough rise. Okay, so we'll put that back up there. And what we'll do now is we'll knock the air out. And the reason why we put olive oil in is to stop it from sticking. So as you can see, my dough hasn't stuck to the actual bowl. Okay, so I'm just going to get cleaned up, and we're going to roll out our pizza. Right, so now the dough has finished rising. I'm just going to use this dough to roll out to make 2 pizzas. Okay, so before we start, I'm just going to flour the top so that it doesn't stick, and I'm going to cut our pizza dough into 2. Okay, and what I'm going to do is use a rolling pin and I'm going to roll it out to about 20 centimetres. And this way it doesn't have to be very accurate, because we're looking rustic, you know. It doesn't have to be completely round. Sometimes, you know, you go to Italy, the northern quarter Italian pizza villages, they just stretch their pizzas, don't use any rolling pins, they just stretch them out. Okay, so we don't want it too thick, because we want a nice crusty crusty edge to the pizza. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put that onto a sheet. Okay, so I've got a baking sheet and I've put a bit of foil on the top, so it's just easier to lift off. And I've put a little bit of oil on it, and I'm just going to put a bit of flour, so again that doesn't stick. And we're going to lay our pizza onto the tray. Okay. Now if you really wanted to, you could do this in advance, put cling film over it and store it in the fridge until you're ready to cook it. But like with most busy households, it's quite easy to do all the preparation in the morning, and then as soon as the kids come home, if it's during term time, then it's something nice, quick and easy, because your pizza dough is done, your topping is done, and the lovely vegetables will be done as well. Okay, so I'm just going to do the other one while I'm here as well. A bit of flour. Again, just a little bit of a roll out to get the basic shape. Do a square one if you like. And then, oh, bit of flour. Okay. And clean as you go. So now we're going to use this lovely, oh, I can smell that garlic and the basil in there, it's lovely. So what we're going to do is we're going to spoon this on, okay. Now you don't want to put it too close to the edge, because again when it's in the oven, it's going to bubble up a little bit. So just leave about an inch from the edge, and that means that every piece that somebody gets is going to have this lovely tomato sauce on. Okay. Now if you wanted to make smaller pizzas, you could obviously do this dough into 4 rather than 2. Sometimes if you've got a family, sometimes it's easier to give them an individual piece than share it all out. So this will go around 4. This one's a little bit more rustic than the other one. And then we're going to get our lovely roasted vegetables. So I've given these a little bit of a turn, okay. And like with a lot of vegetables, you don't want to cook them for too much time, because they lose their bite, they lose their flavour, and we're just going to use these on the top. And again, leaving the juice behind, otherwise we're going to have a soggy pizza. Okay. And again, you can use any toppings you want. I mean, if you want to put some pepperoni on there to have some meat, or some diced chicken, as long as it is cooked beforehand, then that's ideal, because these pizza bases are going to take no more than 10 minutes in the oven. Now, if you're using a pizza oven, they would cook in 3 or 4 minutes, because the heat is quite intense in a proper pizza oven. But just a regular 200 degrees, and it needs to be hot so that the crust comes about. Okay, so maybe just a few more there. And it's a nice way to introduce children to some different vegetables as well, because aubergine and courgettes generally are not always vegetables that children will see every day. So I'm using some mozzarella here. This is slightly firmer than your regular mozzarella because it melts better. If you're using buffalo mozzarella, that is more suitable for salads and a little bit sort of lighter in flavour. This mozzarella, on the other hand, it melts beautifully. So we're just going to put our cheese nice and liberally, because I like a bit of mozzarella. Okay, and the same on this one. And then with the basil, we're going to tear those on top. Okay. And then I always just like a little bit more pepper on top, and into the oven, top shelf, for 10 minutes. Right, so the pizzas have been cooking in the oven for about 15 minutes now, so I'm going to have a sneaky peek and see if they're ready. Oh, well, there's one. And there's two. Two fantastic looking pizzas. And just to make sure that they are cooked through, if you just lift up the pizza, and if it sounds hollow, if you tap it, then it's definitely cooked. No soggy bottoms on pizzas. Okay, so just to serve it, again, you're going to possibly serve this with a bit of nice rocket salad. Have it for its lovely tea time. You can have it all to yourself if you're really hungry. Maybe not. Always good to share though. generous piece here. I say with the two, you'll get enough here for 8 good slices. So, okay. So there. I'm just going to get a nice plate. Make sure. I mean, if you've got a pizza roller, even better, because they probably do the trick at cutting the pizza a little bit better than I'm doing at the moment. Okay, so you can see all that mozzarella cheese is melted nicely, and there we go. Nice Mediterranean vegetable pizza. Okay, thank you. Thanks for watching this week's video. I hope you had some fun, and don't forget to share your photos with us on the Facebook group. See you next week.